And we're in the process of watching Nigeria's new ministers be inaugurated, coming to you live from Aworawo, and that is, of course, the seat of power here in Nigeria. Welcome once again. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun. This is New Central.
And I am Osarogie, Ogbonmwan. This basically sets the tone for what the next 4 years likely would be like for Nigeria. With, of course, here the president, the vice president, the Senate, and now we know what the ministers and those who will be heading various ministries across Nigeria will be for the next 4 years. A lot of Nigerians with mixed reactions to these names that have been inaugurated or currently being inaugurated. And of course, you know, what they think, you know, these ones have to offer. Some of them have described them as square pegs in round holes. Some of them, you know, bold enough to say they are round pegs in round holes. But would always love to know what you think. And social media handles are always available. You could tweet at New Central TV. Let us know your thoughts on these ministers and how excited you are, basically.
Or maybe not, because there's also seemingly a general atmosphere of just some doubts because of the situations, the economic situation right now that Nigerians are currently facing. Data coming out from the National Bureau of Statistics last week just showed how high inflation has gone, food inflation in particular, meaning more Nigerians are spending much more money to get food on their table. So there's also a general atmosphere that doesn't make it seem like people are very excited. But let's run you through a few facts about the ministers. Now we have 48 nominees, and now ministers designate about, let's say, around 30-something of them have been, of course, sworn in so far already. President Bola Tinubu's ministerial list is the largest cabinet assembled so far in the Fourth Republic. It's larger than President Buhari's 43-person cabinet from 2019. This is the largest, actually, since 1999. What we also know is that for the federal government of Nigeria, personnel costs have more than doubled since 2016, which again reignites a conversation around the cost of governance here in Africa's largest economy. We also have a fact that this might just be about beating the legal deadline. So Tinubu was inaugurated on May 29th. We're just under 90 days into his administration. But before former President Muhammadu Buhari left office, he signed a bill into law which stipulated that presidents and governors had 60 days to turn in the list of names for their cabinet. So is this about beating a legal deadline? Are these really the best people that the president could have provided for Nigerians? And he's also the second slowest person in office to name his cabinet. And the first person, of course, was President Buhari in 2015. It took him about 124 days. President Tinubu took him some 60 days right at the edge of the deadline as it was. And many have also observed that this is not a gender-balanced selection. Now, despite the fact that President Tinubu has stated his commitment in his manifesto to achieving a minimum of 35% women's representation in government positions, the actual gender balance observed in the ministerial appointment falls very far short of fulfilling his promises. And unfortunately, no Nigerian president has allocated more than 30% of his ministerial positions to women. So that just runs you through a few facts about this cabinet.
Absolutely. I mean, that is pretty normal, you know, with regards to the recruitment space in Nigeria's political history. Women never really get the 35%. There's continued to be, you know, the clamoring, you know, but it's, you know, it's only good to say when campaigns are being run, you know, that this is some of the things that we would do when we get into office, but it never happens. The same thing with the youth involvement, you know, in these things. You know, I think the guest that we had earlier today on Breakfast Central was, you know, commending the current administration for having more young people, and, you know, the only young person who was really referring to was Bosun. Tijani, of course. You know, every other person there, you know, is in their 50s or even in their 60s. So I'm not sure exactly if there's so much to celebrate with young people in this particular government, except you're talking about the special advisors and the aides and the, you know, social media, you know, advisors. But, you know, these are some of the details that we're looking at. And of course, you know, the reasons why there's people who aren't very happy with the names, and of course the positions, the portfolios that they've been given. Festus Keyamo has been a name that many people have spoken about. He's going to be handling the aviation industry. His professional portfolio doesn't seem to have anything to do with aviation or with transportation. And of course, it also calls to question, you know, how successful he has also been in the ministries that he has handled in the past, you know, as Minister of State during President Muhammadu Buhari's tenure. These are some of the names that I've mentioned. Dele Alake also, who has been the president's, you know, almost right-hand man, right from when he was governor, maybe, of course, even before when he was governor. He, also, of course, has made it into the Minister for Solid Mineral Development. You know, how successful would he be in that regard? Because his majority of his knowledge is in journalism.
In media.
In media, exactly. So there are legitimate questions that need to be asked, and I'm sure Nigerians are eager to continue to, to ask these questions.
And we have someone we're going to ask questions of right now as well. So joining us in the studio, we have Yemi Adamolekun. She is the executive director of Enough is Enough Nigeria, which is the country's premier youth organization that works with a number of other organizations to push forth issues around accountability, transparency, and what young Nigerians also want to see. Yemi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Yemi, I'll start with this because one of the things we've also noticed, another trend from President Tinubu's cabinet is that former governors are also remaining dominant in the Federal Executive Council. So there's actually an unprecedented number of 9 former governors. 9 may not seem a lot to some people, but when we look at the trends in Nigeria's political scene, 9 former governors have made it into the president's cabinets. Also, 1 or 2 on the opposite side of the political divide as well. So, Yemi, let's start from there. What do you think about that? We have former Governor Wike coming to the top of many people's minds when it comes to former governors who are on this list.
Well, so let's take out Malame Rufai because he has then
said no.
down. Yes. So we have 8 out of the 45 that have been confirmed. So that gives us about 18%, which interestingly is the same percentage we have of women who are in the cabinet. I mean, I think it just speaks to what the presidency is interested in. People you are rewarding for loyalty to you, loyalty to the campaign, loyalty to the party, not necessarily, or not necessarily maybe for what they bring to the table. Because I think former Governor Matawale is one of them. And one looks at Katsina and you're wondering, like, why, in a sense, why are you saying what this gentleman did in Katsina you want replicated at a federal level? So yeah, I think it's really not about, it's more about the politics rather than what they're able to deliver.
I mean, now that you just mentioned, we had Nigeria's ambassador to Burundi join us this morning, and he also, had his views on these things. What he said was basically that it's not all the time you need technocrats or professionals in their fields. Sometimes you really should be searching for people with the political will to carry out the jobs, the job that is necessary. And so we should, not be so fixated on having technocrats, and people who for example, and someone who's knowledgeable in aviation to be head in aviation ministry. What you need is someone with political will to ensure that the aviation sector, this is just an example, to ensure that the aviation sector continues to grow and is stable. So do you agree with that? And should Nigerians be comforted with the fact that these persons, a lot of them who have been named, are people who have been, in Nigeria's political space for decades, centuries even? Should Nigerians be comforted by that, or do we really need technocrats?
So I think let's take it back a little bit. So this presidency suffers a crisis of legitimacy. You can call it crisis or not, but there's an issue of legitimacy. People are still in court. A lot of Nigerians don't see him as their president. So number one, if you really wanted to, and part of his claim to fame when they were campaigning was what he did in Lagos, 2-time governor of Lagos, succession plan is put in Lagos, the Lagos master plan, which right now is not feeling very much like a master plan, but I digress. But the Lagos master plan and all of that. And so there was a sense that bringing that to the federal level, and then someone who's wanted to be president, again, the same challenges we had with Buhari, people who've wanted to be president, one would expect a certain level of preparation, a certain level of having thought through, what am I going to do, how am I going to do it, and who are the people that are going to enable me to do it. But what we've seen very clearly with this administration is that they're not very particular about optics. They're not very particular about how we feel. They're not very particular around what does this mean for Nigerians. And it's there in the attitude of who is in the cabinet, who's been nominated, in how fuel subsidy was removed, and how they've handled a number of other issues. So having said that, if you are definitely interested in improving the quality of life of Nigerians, that is what would influence the people you have in cabinet, not necessarily favors. And to your point, it's not necessarily about technocrats, administrators, politicians. Take someone like Wale Edun. Wale Edun has been a part of APC for I don't know how many years, but he's not a front-facing politician. But he is a politician, but people know him more as a technocrat. So if you're looking for someone that can find his way politically, quote unquote, he certainly would be there. And then you take the controversy that we had around Bosun and the things that he said about Buhari, the previous administration. I dare say, I'm pretty sure, maybe all of the minister designates had a challenge one time or the other. So the fact that we do ours on social media, maybe they said there's in a quiet room. But you then have in the same cabinet someone like a Wike and someone like Akpabio, who were both on the other side before, and even up till now, Akpabio has crossed over, but Wike is still a member of the PDP, and he's not, and he's made it very clear that he's not crossing. So you have someone like that, and someone has no issues with him being, and then add that to a security report. Someone has no issues with him being a minister designate, but there's a whole bunch of noise, and you want to burn down the country because Bosun said that Buhari was not behaving properly or not acting properly as a president, or that the senators at the time were doing things that made them seem like they were sleeping. Nothing that he said was not true, but they made it a big deal for the opportunity. So, as you've said, yes, we will have a mixed multitude, but the idea is that overall, when you look at the cabinet, people should feel that, yes, these are people that are going to drive policies that are taking us somewhere. And part of the conversation is that from ex-governors to people that you're wondering, who is this? What has he done? Is what seems to be the summary, really.
So let's talk about one of those who happens to be a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He's now, I believe, the Minister for Power, and that's Adebayo Adelabu. He's an obvious technocrat, many people would say, because of his background and his experience, but he's also the APC gubernatorial candidate that was in Oyo State in 2019. Then after losing the APC governorship primaries last year, he then decamped to the Accord Party, ran unsuccessfully for governor once again. But now he's been made a minister. But he's also said he still wants to be governor of Oyo State. So a lot of people are questioning whether or not this is a man who should be in a cabinet, because he's made it clear that he still has gubernatorial ambitions. He still wants to run. So as a minister over the next 4 years, how is he going to juggle the demands of his ministerial job with his politicking ambitions that he has, that he still wants to be minister of Oyo State? And so people think about that and say, that's really not being a technocrat. That's really not the kind of diverted or separated attention that Nigerians are looking at. So there are a few people on this list, probably more than a few, that we could pick apart in ways like that. Is it even worth it? Because, of course, what we see is that there are lots of people who have some interesting political ties to the president.
I think we also shouldn't shy away from the way politics in Nigeria works. So yes, he's quote-unquote a technocrat because of his background. And yes, he might want to become governor of Oyo State in the future. But the fact that he's a minister helps him. I mean, Kayode Fayemi is a classic example of that. He was a minister in Buhari's first administration and then left, go and run to be governor of Ekiti State. But having served as minister, it gives you certain access, it gives you certain, exposes, well, in a sense, widens your network. So for someone who then wants to run, you then have support that's maybe a bit more national. You've done a bit more favors from your sitting role as a minister that then helps your future political ambition. So it's not the only one. I mean, Yusuf Tuga, who's minister designate for foreign affairs, has also wanted to, I think he's run before, if I'm not mistaken, for governor of Bauchi State. So I'm sure, as you rightly said, there are a few of them that we can pick apart in that regard. But yeah, it's not surprising, and we shouldn't certainly not expect it.
Not expected.
All right. I also want us to look deeper at, one that has been praised, as, I think a square peg in a square hole, and that is Wale Edun. Most people have said, that was a really good pick, and, a lot of people also expected that was who was going to be picked as Minister for Finance by President Tinubu. But there's also those who have doubts, and, feel like the Wale Edun myth at some point will be it will unravel. Yeah. How fantastic did he really do in Lagos? The narrative, concerning what happened in Lagos in between 1999 and 2007, are they factual, or are they really just pretty much the same thing with the way Bola Tinubu's Lagos governorship, has been propelled, to be some magical experience that Lagosians, had between 1999 and 2007. So what are your thoughts on Wale Edun? And of course, knowing that 1999 and 2023 are very separate, times, is what we saw, is what Lagosians saw in between 1999 and 2007 the real deal, or are we in for some film trick?
Yeah,
I mean, the idea of taxation, which is what Lagos really was able to do properly to some extent, is that the fantastic, finance idea, but, maverick idea, but, that we should be looking forward to from Wale Edun?
Yemi, before you answer that, let's just give you a quick rundown of his background because it's a very important portfolio that Wale Edun sits on. He's a native of Ogun State. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of London. He also has a master's degree in economics from the University of Sussex in England. He joined the World Bank IFC in Washington, D.C. in 1986. He's also the founder of Denham Management Limited and chairman of Live Well Initiative, which is a health sector non-governmental organization. He's also co-founder of Stanbic IBTC PLC, and he served as Lagos State Commissioner for Finance from 1999 to 2007. So the two terms that President Tinubu was governor, he was right there with him.
So it's not surprising that he's back.
Yes.
But in terms of what to expect and what if he will live up to the hype, to be honest, I think only time will tell. But what we can't shy away from, though, is the fact that is a name that gives people confidence. So if you speak to people in the financial services sector, it's not a name that people are like, oh God, we're in trouble type response. Now, I mean, I don't know the details of what he did in 1999 to 2007, but to your point about taxation, yeah, that is one element. And you can see it already. The presidency already has a committee on taxation that's meant to review our taxes. Nigerians are undertaxed. They're we need more people in the tax bracket. But I think what Lagos was able to do that made it even advance beyond the private business that started collecting taxes, alpha beta, that became an issue. Because yes, you come in and it's not done properly, you can outsource it for a season. And people now started complaining that it cannot be ad infinitum, where we can put the structures in place for the state itself to collect its own taxes. But we saw it ramp up quite a bit under Fashola because he was very intentional about telling people this is what your taxes paid for, and using that to encourage people to pay tax. And so you had a lot of influencers, if I want to call it that, actors, singers, who were talking about paying taxes and happy to pay taxes because they can see it. Obviously, from Fashola's tenure to now, that's no longer the case. So the case does need to be made for why people should pay taxes, because it's for our own benefit. Because you can't tax me and, in a sense, making life difficult for me. But on the other side, the government is getting bigger and bigger. And you made the point earlier, Tolu, about the size of number of ministries that we have and the size of government. So you take, for example, Ministry of Steel. Steel in 2023 has two ministers, a minister of state and a substantive minister. And you ask yourself why. Then you have Wale Edun, going back to his portfolio. He's one of two coordinating ministers, and he's a coordinating minister of the economy. But there's also a minister for blue economy. There's a minister for creative economy. There's a minister for, I think, a fourth one, if I'm not mistaken, that escapes me at the moment. So you then wonder, and then budget, well, it's not economy, but budget and planning as well, which will technically, if you're coordinating the economy, might be part of that. So you then begin to wonder, if you create all these different fiefdoms, how hard or easy would it be to get things done? So yes, I mean, I think it says a lot that Mr. Edun, what he did at the state level, he's been asked to do it at the federal level. Yes, Lagos did a lot of taxing, but I think beyond taxing, there was just a greater sense of how do we make Lagos conducive for entrepreneurs, conducive for Lagosians. And really, at the end of the day, they say in the land of the blind, a one-eyed man is king. So Lagos was doing things differently, and we saw the different results. But unfortunately, I think for me, we shouldn't forget is the hype of Lagos of 20-odd years ago is not the Lagos now. So we should never forget that it's still the same party that has governed Lagos since 1999. Not only that, it's the same person that has put his successors in office. So if we want to hype Lagos for what Lagos represents, we need to look at the full picture, not at the highlights of when it was actually functioning.
Yeah.
So I want to stay with this coordinating part, which Wale Edun brings up. As you said, he's Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy. Then we still have Ali Pate as coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, while there's still a Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. But this coordinating, we've heard it before. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo did it. We know that Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was a coordinating minister, and we were talking off air. Yemi, what really do you think this coordinating minister is about, especially when we see some of these ministries seem to have some sort of overlap in their areas of concern or areas of management? Nothing for us to get caught up, but just a quick question on that.
It's not caught up, but it's actually very important because it speaks to, because if they're turf wars, people fighting over, I'm supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, then things don't get done. That's number one. Number two, I think what will hopefully happen is that there will be clear meetings to define clear roles. But there's certainly overlaps in the ministries and their portfolios just by the name. I mean, look at the shuffle we had yesterday, for example, where Minister of Environment and Ecological Management was changed because historically, ecological funds, which come from the National Assembly, are housed with the Office of the Secretary to Government. So I'm sure probably the gentleman was like, this cannot then go to a ministry, so bring it back. So that name was changed, for example. But I think what is important is if Mr. Edu is able to quickly kind of set the tone. So the person in charge of the blue economy, where do we overlap? What am I coordinating? What does that look like? Creative economy as well, and what does that look like? Budget and planning, what does that look like? If he's able to have a working relationship with all those ministers and everybody's portfolios are clear, I think they can make it work. But to your point, humanitarian and social welfare, I'd say overlapping. Innovation as well. Bosun Tijani's portfolio has the word innovation in it. Science and tech has the word innovation in it. What does that then look like? Who is innovating what? Do they create boundaries? You innovate on this side. I will innovate on that side. So yeah, so there are quite a number of overlaps in the portfolios, and I guess we'll know in the coming days how they shape up.
There's also, of course, the important aspect of, how best they work with each other. Because if you remember, Godwin Emefiele and Zainab, Ahmed didn't really have the best relationship.
Well, so not surprising, really, because Emefiele was doing a lot of illegal stuff. So
yeah, nobody knows if Zainab was doing her own illegal stuff.
True, very good, very good point. Very good point.
I mean, the point is they didn't have a great working relationship from what it seemed, and we don't know if exactly. Yeah. So we're hoping that Fola Shonubi and Wale Edu, of course, would have a much better working relationship.
If he's retained.
Yes, exactly. So these are important aspects, and of course, I think that Nigerians can also say, we might ask these questions which are important to ask, but it does also feel like a breath of fresh air compared to what we had in the past administration. The Buhari administration, after waiting for months to eventually pick the likes of Adamu as minister, it was really disappointing in those times. And even when they were done, I'm sure that a lot of them came out of that place. We heard a few times that they didn't really know why they were made ministers. Festus Keyamo said, pretty much the same thing. So there's many, aspects and angles with which we can look at these things from, and either say, okay, well, we seem to be in a much better place, or say, well, it's completely hopeless. Well, anyway, you could go ahead.
Okay, so Yemi, another point very interesting that we need to make on this conversation is Dr. Heineken Lokobiri. He's back, also a political player in Nigeria as well, but he's back as Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, which leaves the Minister of Petroleum Resources as a title that we are hearing that President Tinubu himself wants to take up. We've experienced this before. We've experienced it with former President Olusegun Obasanjo. We've experienced it with former President Muhammadu Buhari, and it seems Nigerians are going to experience it again with President Tinubu now. And this also comes just a few days after announcement of the NNPC agreeing to a $3 billion loan with the Afrexim Bank for crude oil. That's also going to help. The deal is also meant to help stabilize the Naira. So a lot of conversation from there as well. What do you think of President Tinubu stepping into those shoes?
Yes, I mean, the signaling for me is the fact that we're still focusing on oil as, well, rightfully, it is our current forex earner, exactly. But I think moving forward and looking at revamping that sector, the fact that he's made himself minister says that well, let me take that back. It's either that I really want to be hands-on so we can do this thing really quickly and get out of it, or business continues.
Whose business?
The business of making money from Nigeria's money.
Interesting.
Wow. A very short answer there.
But I also want to ask, and I think we're going to go back to, the individuals, after this. But I also want to ask about, you can put anybody in those positions. But if the government itself, if its manifesto, if its plans for the country don't, have any energy or any drive, it doesn't matter who you put in these positions. You can put Wale Edun or you could put, Angel Gabriel. if the government itself doesn't have the passion and the will to actually make those parts of Nigeria's, economy work, it's a waste of time. So I want to get your views on, how do you feel about what this administration is bringing to to Nigeria in the next 4 years? Regardless of who they put in those positions, does their manifesto show that they understand what is at stake and these are the person that they believe will help them achieve those things? Do they seem like a group of people who want to see a better Nigeria in the next 4 years?
Well, the same way when, regardless of what's happening in Nigeria, when the Nigerian team play and we win, everybody gets excited.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the price of fuel is, doesn't matter who's upsetting you, doesn't matter whatever it is. And it's not a function of, is the person Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, whoever is on the field, as long as they win, there's kind of this euphoria, everybody's excited, everybody is proud to be Nigerian. When our Afrobeat stars do well abroad or people are listening to their music in different countries, people are excited to be Nigerian. And I think in a way you can parallel that to things like a cabinet or things like signaling that comes both at the state level and at the federal level, because it communicates that this is where we're going. And to your point, I think you're spot on. There's nothing that I have seen that's articulated very clearly a vision for where this administration is taking Nigerians. Like, this is what I see, this is where we are going. But what we do see is what we started off talking about recycling politicians. You said centuries, who've been around for centuries, people that we don't know really what they bring to the table, people that are not exciting us, that, oh, these people care about us. And then we have comments like, let the poor breathe, 2 million naira for 6-week recess. So those are the things that people are seeing and feeling. So you're right, it's not necessarily, so if they had brought in people that communicates differently, like, okay, because it means that there was thought. So someone sat down. I mean, that's another thing. One of the other ministries I wanted to mention, Ministry of Water Resources and Sanitation. Sanitation is a local government function. Why do we have a minister in charge of that? Why? And the fact that, so anybody that was in the room when these things were being discussed didn't know that enough to bring it up and say, we shouldn't have that. So what this reflects for people is the fact that these hasn't really been thought out with the end in mind, i.e. make life better for Nigerians. We're here to serve Nigerians. And unfortunately, that's what we have. And that's what we'll have to deal with unless something happens.
All right, Yemi, let's bring in our second guest now. We have joining us online Professor David Aworawo. He's a professor of international relations and strategic studies from the University of Lagos. Professor Aworawo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on the program.
So I'll give you this question, and Yemi, I'll come back to you because I'd also like to hear your thoughts. We see a little bit of change in the naming of some of the ministries. Let me quickly run through a few that popped into my head. We now have a Minister of Marine and Blue Economy. We have a Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, something added there, Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. And Agriculture was also now combined with a Minister of Agriculture and Food Security. And then there's a Minister of Gas Resources. So there seems to be a splitting of some of the responsibilities of the ministries from what they were before, and then even an inclusion of things like a Marine and Blue Economy and the Creative Economy as well. Professor, what do you make of this? Because some would say a rose is a rose by any other name, even if you don't call it a rose because it smells like a rose, it is still a rose. Do these make sense in terms of the direction we might be expecting from the Tinubu administration, or is it just change of nomenclature? It's just a change of name and it doesn't really do anything for the Nigerian people. Professor, the question is for you.
Maybe something is wrong with the audio. I couldn't hear the question. If you can hear me.
Okay, yes, I can hear you. So let me quickly take that again. We have some interesting ministries now. Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, Aviation and Aerospace Development, Agriculture and Food Security, and even Gas Resources. A few that quickly come to mind. What do you make of these combinations, a separation from others, and then a combining of new ministries, or at least new portfolios under these ministries?
Well, there have been some adjustments in the way the ministries are structured. which is good. We now have a ministry for blue economy, a ministry that is focusing on harnessing the resources, the maritime resources of the country. The Ministry of Transportation will lose some of its, parastatals to that ministry. If that ministry is well managed and well administered, it is going to add a huge lot of resources to to Nigeria. Of course, like Yemi said, Ministry of Environment and Sanitation. We don't need sanitation to be part of. Water resources and sanitation. We don't need sanitation to be part of water resources because that is not the function of the federal government. So we have had adjustments here and there, but generally the adjustments I think they are positive adjustments, except those few ones like that sanitation that we talked about. We also have the Ministry of Aviation. It has aerospace development as a component now added to it. It's in line with contemporary development where aerospace is very important now. Gas has been separated from the usual ministry, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. All those adjustments here and there, it should be okay if they are well managed, they are well administered. If those key things that are required for ministries to function well, are in place, competence, capacity, commitment, by the ministers. I'm not as pessimistic as some people are regarding the performance, even though I thought that there could be more professionals and in the cabinet, because historically, when you have a cabinet that more professionals are there, they tend to do better. They tend to do better than politicians. The thing is flooded with too many politicians, political reward and all that, and that would be a problem. But there are individuals, Wale Edun, somebody has mentioned that name, the Minister of Justice, Minister of Digital Economy, Bosun, the Minister of Education, Tahir Maman, Minister of Health. These are individuals who have held their own in their respective activities before now, and one will expect that they will do well in their ministries. We just hope that the Parliament will cooperate, will ensure that there are no bottlenecks. Even Keyamu, that some people have raised the issues about, Keyamu is an achiever. It's just that all those election things and comments made, he has attracted a whole lot of, enemies from the public. But in terms of achievement, I mean, Keyamu is an achiever. So I'm not as pessimistic as many others regarding the capacity of these ministries to, function well and meet the needs of Nigerians. What we just need, that sincerity of purpose, that drive, that commitment to be able to, get things right, and of course ensure that the benefits, translate to the raising of the standard of living of Nigerians, and of course the better life development, for everybody.
Okay. Yemi, I'd really quickly want to get your thoughts on that. Some of these new ministries, I know people were excited about arts, culture, and creative economy in terms of course, having a specific minister dealing with that as well. Marine and blue economy, even separating gas resources out from petroleum resources as well. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of them were not necessary. Given where we are in the country and this whole message that we need to tighten our belts, we don't have money, creating a new ministry requires staff. So you are looking for office space. You are hiring more people to be there. You have overheads. People are traveling. And this is the time when somebody said they're going to London to go and explore what's happening in the creative sector. I need to go to Hollywood to see how they're doing it there so we can influence. I mean, so you start having people traveling because they're trying to learn, quote and unquote, for their new ministry. So I think it's really unnecessary, especially because we have a lot of departments and agencies that these things could have started with, in terms of if you were really serious, promoting these things on a small level. I mean, look at someone like Abike Dabiri and what she did with the Diaspora Commission. She just really owned it and ran with it. She didn't need a ministry to do it. Technically, could have created a ministry for the diaspora. Could have been created because we needed to give her a ministry. But she had a commission and she ran with it. And there are existing, I mean, none come to top of my head at the moment for the ministries that we're talking about. But there are departments that we could have looked into in saying, okay, how do we strengthen this if really outcomes was our mission? And let's not forget the Osarogie report that's been plaguing us for how many years that talks about streamlining our NDAs, but we've just created more.
Yeah, and of course, creating more means that we should be able to fund them. So, Professor, I'm going to go back to you to share your views on how, we also need to be able to fund these ministries and be able to fund whatever prospects that they would have, because, you can create, them and, put people in charge of them, but, will they achieve anything if there is not enough funding, that goes to these ministries? So talk about that aspect also. How do you expect the coordination to go between the executive and, or rather the presidency and these ministries, if they will really be able to achieve anything? And can we really afford to keep all these ministries running?
Yes, it's a matter of grave concern. Inadequate funds to carry out the activities, for the ministries to carry out the activities. It's a problem. I was close to some people in the Ministry of Works, and I was saying, how come under Fascia we have not recorded a far greater success in infrastructure development? And my attention was drawn to funds that, funds, they were inadequate funds, and the government could only do as much as available funds would permit. So yes, you are right. Once the funds are not there, there isn't much that the minister or the ministries can do to fulfill their objectives. But I don't think it will be also that bad, because additional funds are coming in, and it depends on how these funds are managed. If Parliament does not, pad the budget and add all sorts of things and reduce what is available for the ministers to use to, carry out their various activities, we won't get, it will not be so robust, because we have economic issues, we have, financial problems. But it will also be so bad as well, if the resources are well managed. So I think we should be able to have fairly enough, funds for the various ministries to be able to carry out their respective activities. More so, since it seems that so many areas are now being tapped for additional funds to come in, and once that is done, once wastes are reduced, and then the funds come in and they are used judiciously, we won't get to where we want, because the funds will not be adequate. It will also not be that terrible in terms of not having funds at all to be able to carry out these things. So it comes back to the issues I referred to earlier: capacity, competence, and commitment on the part of those who head the various ministries. Will determine how things turn out. How much you're able to achieve at the end of the day.
But, we could also argue that these are prayers.
Talking about,
exactly.
It doesn't seem like, Professor, apologies. I'm saying we could also argue that these are just prayers. It doesn't seem like that's what the government has in mind. What you're saying. They're throwing around 185 billion naira to states. They know that I'm sure they know that these funds will not be adequately used to help anybody, and to survive the removal of petrol subsidy. They know. So we say these things on television, and this is the TV thing to say. These are the prospective, ways that, or the ways that this thing should be said. But we also need to say the truth. A lot of Nigerians do not believe that these funds would go anywhere, or would help any Nigerian survive the removal of petrol subsidy. But yet the government has given out 185 billion. So that's not a government that wants to save money and use money judiciously. I don't think so.
Not at all.
We're also not even sure where we currently stand with petrol subsidy. If we have truly removed it or we haven't removed it. We just know that the president has said that subsidy is gone, and right now our ban is 600 naira. Tolu?
Yemi, I can hear you making some comments here. So let's get your thoughts on what Osa has said, and of course, in reaction as well to what Professor Aworawo has said, in terms of it's about capacity, it's about will, it's about strength to do it. And yes, the funds should somehow make themselves available.
I disagree. I don't think in terms of prioritizing whatever funds that we have, it should be prioritized on creating new ministries without a clear plan in an administration that hasn't shown a clear vision for where it's taking Nigerians. And to Osa's point about palliative measures, quote and unquote, how does Bayelsa and Ekiti have the same amount of money as Lagos or Kano? It just makes no sense. So in terms of judicious spending of resources and managing resources, the administration clearly is showing that that's not what this game is about. By the way, our National Assembly got 2 million naira each to go on a 6-week holiday. I will keep repeating that just to drive home the point that anybody that's saying, if we get more money, then this administration will then spend it in making sure that the ministries have the money they need. We did not need to create new ministries. Read my lips. And now that we've created them, we're now going to start looking for money to fund them. The ministers will be under pressure to find money to fund their ministries and doing all sorts of things to get that done. It's just ridiculous. Every minister gets a car, then the aid, then the office, then security. Really though, all the Constitution says is every state needs a minister. So 36 plus FCT, we could have stopped at 37. We went to 48 and we're still dancing around ministries at this point in time. It's really just quite unfortunate, really. But I think the main lesson for me though is that we need to, as Nigerians, pay attention. This administration is not in the business of saving us money. It's going to be a spendthrift administration, and we need to start watching it now.
So before we go away from that, I want us to quickly also look at the regional spread. I know this has been something that has come up as well. The Southeast seems to have the fewest number of ministers in this cabinet. It's the majority of ministerial nominees, now ministers designated, now many ministers as it is, I beg your pardon, from the Northwest and Southwest. Now both zones had 9. Then we have the Northeast zone where Vice President Shetima is from, also having 9 as well. And I know there's a bit of conversation around that also coming out of the President Buhari years and some of the conversations around the unequal balancing, the unequal balancing of very public national posts as it would be, and how those things also led to some cracks and fissures with Nigerians as well. When you look at the regional makeup of the president's cabinets, what do you think? Yemi, let me start with you.
Same thing. I think, as I said earlier, for part of where we are, that would be important, especially with an administration that's still fighting for its legitimacy, both home and abroad, is to care what Nigerians feel about being included and being intentionally inclusive of Nigerians. So you have women, the promise they made of 35%, they failed on that. You have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Nigeria's youth policies say people under 35. The youngest minister now is Beta Edu, who's 36, so maybe you'll give them a pass for that one. Persons with disability, the fact that they are excluded, and I believe the Disability Act says something about them being a quota for persons with disability in appointments. So the fact that no one with a disability was part of the ministerial list, that's also there. And then the point that you're speaking to around regional distribution and spread. Same as you said with Buhari years, in people feeling that they were not really a part of the Nigeria because their own ethnic group or their part of the country was ignored either from an appointment perspective or a security perspective. Now we're seeing that again under this administration, even though we have a federal character commission that's also being investigated for payments for drugs. I mean, so it's just a whole mess. And so there has to be an intentionality around these things. And this administration has shown very clearly that they're not concerned about that at all.
All right. Professor, I'm going to come back to you so we can look closer at, I want us to focus on health. We had, of course, Osagie Hanire, who was Minister of Health during President Buhari's tenure. Now is going to be Ali Pate. He has a very interesting profile and professional history. Shows that he, of course, has extensive years of study in health. So, of course, he's one of those that everyone would say is a round peg in a round hole. But, of course, I understand that we also have a lot of things that need to be put in place for a health ministry to be fully functional. And, of course, for the Nigerian health sector to be fully functional, both on the federal level and on the state level. So I want us to talk, in particular with, to health. Do you believe that, of course, if we as a country can set our, targets for ourselves health-wise, increase the budget that we give to health, and be able to achieve more with regards health with Ali Pate in charge?
Prof, are you with us?
Well, the minister, yes, has a robust profile. He has distinguished himself over the years in medical practice. He has also been, a politician, so one will imagine that he has what it takes to be able to get around, to get what he wants to, ensure that his ministry functions properly and fulfills his objective. But as we all know, the challenges in the health sector are enormous. They are enormous, they are multidimensional, they are multifaceted. The hospitals are just there, the facilities that are modern, that are required, are not there, which is why the vast majority of Nigerians who middle class and upper class, they simply patronize the private hospitals. The challenges before him are vast. How he's able to get around the resources he needs, to be able to ensure that the health sector in Nigeria gets somewhere close to the level it was in the early 1960s, when people came from all over the place to come and get treatment here in Nigeria, remains to be seen. But given his profile, we can only be hopeful that at least there will be extensive improvements in the health sector. And of course, given the complaints that people have raised regarding inadequate funding for the health sector, and of course, education too, in the past couple of years. One will hope that the next budget, even if we have supplementary budget before then, focus will be to that sector. And of course, with the minister, with all he has done so far until now, we hope that the health sector will be rejigged, so to speak. There will be some momentum in the activities in the health sector, moving forward. But of course, one thing we should also emphasize is the fact that there is this psychological dimension to how the health sector functions. The fact that the president, the governor, many public office holders do not, attend hospitals here. Perhaps the government can assist in that regard by just, adopting that policy that, look, all of us, let's get the health sector to work. All of us will get our treatment here. We recall that President Buhari was always going outside. President Tinubu, until now, also has followed the same trajectory. Of course, Nigerians will be enthused and happy if that can change. And that would, of course, make it possible for more resources to be channeled to the health sector. But with the minister as a person, I think he will perform if the resources are available.
Okay. We will be wrapping things up in just a bit, but we'd like to give our guests an opportunity to give us some final thoughts on this. President Tinubu inaugurating his cabinet today, starting this morning. And of course, activities are still a bit on right now. But Yemi, let's come to you before we wrap this up. In terms of all of this, what we've seen, the caliber of the people, their backgrounds, their portfolios, an expansion of the cabinet as well, which is said to be the largest in Nigeria's history for the Fourth Republic. What are your final thoughts?
Thanks. You ended up on health. I just wanted to kind of highlight ministers that I was looking forward to what they would do. So Pate certainly one, not new to government, and gave up a pretty lucrative job to come and become a civil servant in Nigeria. So I think that says a lot, and I hope that what he plans to do, that he's able to accomplish it, and we see it in the impact in the health sector. And it doesn't have to be big. I'm reminded of Olukoye Ransome-Kuti, who, when he came in, was very focused on primary health care. And his point was that if we can do preventive health care, then we don't need to be doing surgeries at the tertiary level. And he was known for that, not just locally, but also globally, including traveling to various public health facilities across the country. So I really hope Pate is able to do something that leaves a legacy after his tenure. We've talked about Mr. Edo and finance. Education is also very important for me. As I think you alluded to it earlier, Tolu, with Adamu. The 8 years under him was just a disaster. And the fact that he wasn't changed at all also obviously speaks to former President Buhari and his sense of priority he gave to education. So this new minister, Maman, if I'm not mistaken, former VC at Base University, he was DG at the Nigerian Law School. So I think the fact that He's done both private and public institutions. He understands the cost structure. I think for me, especially at the tertiary education level, because we have huge problems at that level. And for a country that wants to compete, we need to restructure how we do tertiary education. So I'm really looking forward to what he's able to bring to that ministry. And then lastly, foreign affairs. Ugo Tukur was former ambassador to Germany. Had the privilege of meeting him a few months ago, actually. And his track record speaks very well for him. And the world is a bit crazy at the moment, just a tad bit crazy. And so it'd be really good to have someone in that office who can speak for Nigeria in a confident manner, who can engage and put, in a sense, Nigeria's best foot forward, regardless of what many challenges we have, both internally and what we're facing globally. Thank you.
No quick words for the FCT minister?
I look forward to seeing what happens in Abuja. That's all I'll say.
All right, so we'll leave it at that for now. Prof, we'll get your final thoughts very quickly. Professor Aworawo as well. Just your final thoughts on how all of the things are shaping up ahead of us and in front of Nigerians as well. Just shy of 90 days after President Tinubu was inaugurated, hitting 60 days on the mark to get his ministers in as well for the National Assembly. But now they have been inaugurated.
Where things are shaping up, the government is doing its utmost, to ensure that at least it keeps to the constitutional provisions. Many people raise issues regarding the batches. For instance, the second batch, the list of the second batch came after the 90 days, had passed. People pointed to that as, not following the law, but at least thankfully the inauguration has taken place now. So what is left now is for the ministers to, begin to work. Like I said before, the way the government has carried on so far, Nigeria is going to, make more money. So how that money is utilized will be the challenge. I agree with some of the things that Yemi has said regarding the way the government has carried on so far has not reflected, prudence. More ministries created means more money spent on bureaucracy and the rest. And the government itself, the way things have, gone so far, has not reflected a government that will be frugal. And that is what we advise, that the government needs to be far more frugal. I mean, the monies that have made available to National Assembly members, 70 billion just to settle down, another 40 billion for bulletproof cars. At this time, all of those things are why people are skeptical regarding the government doing better than what it met. That even if more money is made and the thing is frittered away on prodigalities, then we'll be on the same spot. But we can only be hopeful. Like I said before, I would have wanted to see more professionals, on the list. That hasn't quite happened. Politicians are far more. And even the appointment itself to certain positions. For instance, the minister of, the minister in charge of defense, and then the minister of state for defense, that's Badaru Amatawali. One will ask questions regarding what qualifies them to be appointed to those positions. Wike is the third Mr. Project. Let's hope that brings that again to the Federal Capital Territory, and of course also focus on planning of the city, and of course making the city beautiful and all that, not just putting projects here and there haphazardly. It's not it's a structure that has not really been what we expected it to be, but not as bad as some have perceived it. Let's just wait and see and hope that the right things will be done, and these ministers will be able to deliver on their objective, so that Nigerians can have a far higher standard of living, and Nigeria can begin to also hold its own, as a true giant of Africa, and of course in the global community. depending on how things are, handled, how things are addressed, and how things are, how much energy, how much commitment, these ministers and of course the president himself are able to address all of these issues that face Nigerians at present.
Also, we'd like to get your thoughts on something very quickly. We touched base with Yemi before she had to leave. So we know that the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources is Heineken Lokobiri, and we know that we've seen gas resources being removed from the Petroleum Resources Ministry. But what we hear now is, of course, that President Tinubu is ready to wear the mantle of the Minister of Petroleum Resources himself. This is not anything new to us as Nigerians, but do you think it's the right thing to do for the petroleum ministry, the petroleum industry, oil and gas as it is? Given the situation of things, Nigeria has failed to make excess profits, where in the past 2 years, many companies like Glencore, Saudi Aramco, and others have actually been making billions of extra dollars in terms of the profit they've made because of the increase in crude oil prices on the international market. So now the president wants to take on that responsibility fully, a responsibility that we know that former President Muhammadu Buhari also took on, but many would say, to what end? So what do you think about the president wearing the mantle of Minister of Petroleum Resources?
Yes, I think the president being the Minister of Petroleum is a bad idea. Because what that means is that there will be nobody to report to. That is the highest authority. There should be somebody in charge of that ministry that will report to the president. Besides, the president will be too busy to combine his numerous other activities with being the Minister of Petroleum Resources. I think it's a bad idea. It started with President Buhari, and unfortunately, President Tinubu has followed that path. It's a bad idea. The president has too many things to attend to for him to have the same the commitment that ministry requires to be able to function properly. Minister of State, Minister is Minister. It's a very, very bad idea. And moving forward, we hope that that will change. Of course, under him, almost functioning as Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was eventually appointed. We hope that a substantive minister will be appointed to, man that ministry, and not the president. The president is too busy. And look at, and it's a ministry that has a whole lot of challenges. Right now, as we speak, our oil export is about less than 1.1 million barrels per day. What was 2.3 million barrels per day under Goodluck Jonathan? I mean, we have come to less than half. We can't even, almost coming to half of the quota that OPEC has allocated to us. That ministry requires all the attention that is needed for us to be able to, get resources, get foreign exchange, to be able to drive the economy and improve the quality of life of Nigerians. So the president, with all his other numerous functions and activities, should not be the one heading the petroleum ministry. There should be a substantive minister to head that ministry, and of course the Minister of State, who will now report to the president as other ministers do. So I think it is not a good idea, and I would hope that moving forward in a short time,
well, it might,
the president will relinquish that position.
It might paint a picture as to what exactly or how they see the petroleum ministry and the petroleum industry generally. President Buhari, of course, I'm sure nobody would argue that he really had almost zero effect in the Ministry of Petroleum while being a petroleum minister. So if we continue on that path, making the president the Minister of Petroleum, then it really just tells that there's stuff that, maybe they see that we do not see, that makes them continue to hold on to that. But let's bring in Ibim Semenitari, is the former Commissioner for Information in Rivers State. Or she, I beg your pardon, is the former Commissioner for Information in Rivers State. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for joining us. Great thing we just started with petroleum now. So I want you to kick off with that conversation, or your thoughts on President Bola Tinubu being likely the Minister of Petroleum. We're continuing to do the same thing that we've done in the past that didn't seem to work. How do you think it would play out this time?
Thank you very much. the truth, I think, is that when they look at the Ministry of Petroleum, I guess presidents consider it the nerve center of the Nigerian economy, and so seem to want to have a handle on things. So they want to almost directly superintend that. But again, like you said, when you look at experiences from the past, it doesn't seem that they have sufficient time to directly superintend it. So it might be a good idea to rethink that, but perhaps President Bola Tinubu might have a new way he wants to go about things. Maybe when he sees it and sees if it's not working well enough, he might change his mind. I think, however, it has to do with who the president is and how much time he's able to devote to that. With the kind of things he has to do at on the foreign scene, though, and with the economy of the nation, it might be a good idea for, even if he wants to designate it as special, if you like, a special attention ministry, it might still be a good idea to have a substantive minister. However, like I said, it's early days yet. Let's see what the president wants to do. Let's see how his hand unfolds. My preference would be a substantial minister for petroleum.
All right, Ibim, thank you so much for joining us. Now, we had Yemi Adamolekun, the Executive Director of Enough is Enough Nigeria, with us just before you came in. And we touched a bit about the gender balance, and I'm glad you're here now. And Prof will also get to you as well. But let's explore that a bit more in terms of President Tinubu's cabinet. So what we know is that there are 9 women in this cabinet, making that just about 18.75% of the overall number of ministers that the president has. Now, in his campaigning, in his manifesto, the president did promise some 35%, at least 35% of all governmental positions would go to women in order to increase women's participation in governance as well. Now, according to that document, it says this legislation shall also mandate that the federal executive, particularly the cabinet and core senior advisors, to reserve a minimum number of senior positions to women. But that's not what we're seeing. That's not what we've seen. That's not what the cabinet is representing as of now. Some might say maybe it's difficult for the president to find women in these situations. But we're seeing countries like Rwanda and other countries around the continent and around the world making things happen with women in political positions. So, Ibim, let me start with you before I come to Prof. What do we make of the president having these promises, having this stated in his manifesto, campaigning with this, and in an opportunity where he gets to really live what he promised, he's falling quite short of that promise?
I'm looking at this and I'm really hoping that as more things open up, because, the promises in executive positions, first is I disagree with anyone who says there are not sufficient women to fill the positions, because we do have women, very able, very capable women who would meet more than 50% of cabinet, even if you wanted them, not to talk of 35%. So we do have women. Of course, the way politics goes, a lot of dynamics come into play. I did hope that President Tinubu would have at least 35% of women, just because he is known to be favorably disposed towards gender balance and issues around gender and issues around women. So I really did hope that we're going to see, for the first time in our country, 35% of the cabinet as women. We haven't seen that. I'm going to still say, well, it's early days, and I will hope that he will make up for that in other executive positions, heads of agencies, heads of parastatals, in other ways, permanent secretaries, and of course, in other advisory positions. I hope he ends up having more women in executive positions, because the truth of the matter is that our country really does need to step up when it comes to this game of gender balance. It needs to step up. You can't have a nation where you have more than half of your population falling behind. It just doesn't help. And studies have shown that when you have women in executive positions in corporate organizations, you do see a lot of turnaround in those organizations. So clearly, if we have more women in executive position, it will for the nation. I will say I'm disappointed that we don't have 35% of women, but I'm going to keep saying it's early days yet. Let's see.
Okay, Prof.
Aworawo.
Yeah. Okay, Prof. I would like to get your thoughts on this as well. Ibim says she is just still hopeful for this in the long run in terms of seeing how the president will actualize his promise concerning gender balance. And as she said, research does show having more women in these executive positions, be them governmental or in the corporate world, also bear positive fruits. Apparently, I think we've lost the connection to Professor David Aworawo as it was. I would love to get his thoughts on that. But Prof, I think you're back with us now.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, so your thoughts on the president's lack of promised gender balance. Should we hold on to hope, as Ibim has said, in terms of expecting him to put more women in areas of heads of ministries? Well, we've left the ministries, departments and agencies as it may be, or is this something that was good for the campaign, but not so good for the actual governance?
Well, it's another area where people are disappointed because there was a promise that a certain percentage, 35%, of the appointments will be women. What we have now is not anywhere near that. It's not even up to 20%. So I haven't failed at the level of the ministries, that's head of ministry, that's ministers, ministerial appointments. Let's hope that in the appointments into heads of agencies and departments, we'll have more women in that. But we'll have expected, a lot more women, competent women across the country that could have occupied important positions, head ministries, and they have a track record of doing well, but somehow the president didn't fulfill his promise along that line. We hope that the president will make up for that in the appointments of heads of ministries, departments and agencies of government. The same as we're talking about diversity now. The same we also expect that certain regions of the country that have not been well represented in terms of course, there's one thing to head it because the constitution provides for one minister, at least one minister per state. Ogun State has 3. The Southeast all have 1 each. And even the ministries that they are assigned to head, people have raised questions that somebody was speaking the other and said, this is almost like the same pattern that has continued over the years. And that some regions, have key ministries, so to speak. And of course, they look at key ministries from the point of view of the functions they perform and the amount of money usually, allocated to those ministries. So we are talking about diversity. More women should be appointed to head ministries and agencies and departments of government. And of course, those regions of Nigeria where that have not been favored, so to speak, in this ministerial appointment, we also hope that the president will pay attention to that so that, a measure of equity will take place. And these are the ways by which national integration and cohesion can be enhanced.
All right. I want to, go back to a question that we played around earlier. I'm going to have Ibim Semenitari speak on this. In the build-up to the elections, there was a lot of talk about the Lagos model, and how Lagos was successful under Bola Tinubu. Would you say that Nigeria needs the, in quote, Lagos model? Is that a thing that you think would work with the way that governance was carried out in Lagos between 1999 and 2007? If those are the same ideas for governance, in 2023, do you think Nigeria would survive it? Can Nigerians, the theory is that taxation was the bane of, the economy back then in Lagos, and that's how Lagos was able to, triple its IGR, or even more than triple it. Can Nigerians survive that concept of financing and raising money in 2023?
I don't know if a Lagos model is what it should be. I would always prefer to say Nigerian model perhaps works best. But if you don't mind, I just wanted to intervene a little in what Prof said in terms of regions getting, as it were, A ministries. The Southeast has Ministry of Works. I'm not sure it gets any more A list than that. The Niger Delta has been able to get, for the first time in 47 years, Ministry of FCT, and so on and so forth. For the first time, the FCT has a minister in cabinet. So in terms of getting some of those things of feeling a Nigerianness, I think that the president has shown that he does intend to be a Nigerian president. But having said that, I think we should look at a Nigerian model. What will work for the country? Yes, Lagos, we have a few good examples that we can borrow. No, I don't think that everything Lagos should be carried lock, stock, and barrel and replicated in Nigeria. There are good stories and good examples to borrow. There are things that might not work because you've got to think about each state of the federation and what works there. But again, when we talk about taxation, it's important to look at that tax model to ensure that it is fair and equitable, because part of the problem when we scream taxation is to ask whether those who should really pay are paying, or whether we're making the middle class carry the burden of everyone, and then the rich just continue to get richer while the middle class is impoverished, and then right now we don't even have a middle class. So I think that it might be important to look at that taxation model so that it is free, fair, and equitable across board, but also so that Nigerians see what those taxes are being used for. It doesn't make any sense to pay all that money and not get benefits from it.
All right, and so we'll have to wrap the conversation now because, of course, we have things on the agenda for us. But we want to say a very big thank you for our guest, Yemi Adamolekun. She was with us earlier, Executive Director of Enough is Enough Nigeria. And we're wrapping up this conversation with Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, and also joining us, Ibim Semenitari, former Commissioner for Information from Rivers State. Lady and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us as we looked at the inauguration of Nigeria's new cabinet. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And of course, this is a conversation that's going to continue. I'll emphasize again that the National Bureau of Statistics released data last week that many, of course, know continue to paint a gloomy picture for where Nigeria is right now. Now, inflation has jumped to 24.08%, and food inflation is now at 26.98%. We also have an economy that last year actually had debt servicing overtake its revenue. So this is a very precarious moment that Nigeria finds itself in. New administration, new cabinet, and regardless of the ministry many of these ministers find themselves in, everybody's going to be asking what they're doing to get Nigeria out of where the country is right now.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of work, and you know, every little mistake or every little step will be scrutinized by Nigerians. There would be a lot of red flags being pointed out by Nigerians. And so the government, the administration of Bola Tinubu, and of course everyone around him has a lot of work to do to not just lift Nigeria and push it in the right direction, but also let Nigerians know and convince them that they haven't made a mistake with the electoral process. So we of course will continue to x-ray these moments and these details bit by bit for the rest of the day here at News Central, and of course back here again tomorrow morning on Breakfast Central. We'll expand more on these conversations. Thank you so much for staying with us and for joining us, and we wish you a very brilliant rest of this Monday.
All right, have a good one. I'm Tolulope, Adeleru-Balogun.
And I am Osarogie, Ogbonmwan.
We'll see you.